So care package arrived and has a carburetor, ignition, spark plugs, stuff like that. Now I was already using these. This was not something that I needed more of, but thank you very much. I got a box of them. But it has the old style air filter. Yeah, lots of activity going on here. And that means a new cover. And bucking spikes. These are interesting to me. These are a new product offering, what I understand, from Oregon. But because of the nature of this ignition module, I'd have to destroy the other one to use it. And he wants me to try the filter and carburetor first to see whether or not it's a carburetor issue or a filter issue. Because I have to destroy the ignition to get the ignition wire out to do this one. I think that's what I'm going to do first. We'll put on the filter and the carburetor and, you know, that stuff. Shouldn't take but a minute. Pretty sure I'm going to go back to the 372 carburetor. Look at the size of the throat on this one versus that one. That one's probably 30,000 smaller. So that's a potential loss of performance on the top side. So strike one on this carburetor is a smaller throat. Strike two is I had to take that thing off. Otherwise it wouldn't fit into the air box there. So yeah, we'll see if it works. Give it a shot. My hunch is it's not going to make any difference at all on the stalling part of this thing. And if it doesn't, we're going back to that one because that made a huge difference on performance. Strike three, the diameter, that's too big to go into the rubber piece there, so I can't use this carburetor. I mean, I can, I just don't want to force it and dig out that rubber too much. So this one's going to go on the back burner. I don't think it's going to help anything anyway. Check this out. The plug wire goes underneath the flywheel. So I just twisted it off. 0 minus 0. See if I can twist the other one on and get it back together to see if it runs. But other than that, I got to pop the flywheel to pull this wire out. Yeah. It's definitely making more RPMs, and I had to put the 372 carburetor back on. The other one's not really going to fit well. I mean, I can force it by pulling out some things, but you know, until this proves that it's not working, I think I just want to stick with this arrangement. But the filter and the coil definitely have made a difference on the top side of things. So now I just have to go run it for a while and see if it stays running. That's about it. Now I'll have to take a little break, change out a hose, started nudging on the stumps down there, and next thing I know there was a shower of hydraulic, but I pushed a lot of those trees off. Have that Makita Domar with the red ignition and the old style cover and filter. And was going to try to blend the carburetor. It's just too many things to change out. I don't think the carburetor had anything to do with it anyway. Seeing as that stalling issue happened both with the stock carburetor and the 372, so the characteristic didn't change with the carburetors. And the carburetor from the 372 has a larger inside diameter, which means if things are flowing better, more potential top-end performance. But I think I just want to get a little bit of time in to prove the point. It either runs and doesn't stall or does the same thing it did before. And then we're right back to square one. You know, then it's going to be things like fuel, plug wire routing or something like that that could be causing the issues. Pulse line maybe, you know, can't totally discount carburation at some level. But anyway, let's go see if we can go get some work done. I'll start out by taking that one tree right there down. It's never going to be a log, and I am going to branch out that direction at some point too. And it's going to fall off, get held up by a bunch of trees, so it'll give me something to do. And if I get through that tree, then I have a bunch off to the right that I do need to take down as well. So let's start with that one. Block it up and see if we get through that today, this evening. And first thing is, it's been sitting now. Will it start? And that's one of the definitions of a good saw, right? It can look pretty, but if it don't start, it's not much of a saw. Well, I put some time on this saw, this one right here, and I honestly think that we've gotten the problem it had solved. So just to review, this was a new out-of-the-box Makita, and it's the EA7900P model. It had the full wrap and big spikes and all that kind of silly stuff. And it ran right first couple of videos, but it wouldn't give me RPMs. I got frustrated with it trying to tune. So I knew I had an issue, but I didn't know how much of an issue I had until later. And so I did things like try to lean it out. You know, I tried different spark plugs, and I didn't really get a lot of movement in how the saw ran until I changed the carburetor out to a 372 carburetor from a original edition Husqvarna, and that really cleaned things up. So I knew I was in the right direction by doing that, but then it kept stalling. It was stalling before and it kept stalling after, and I kept blaming it on going rich and stuff like that. But it kind of dawned on me, now this feels like ignition. And then by putting the 372 carburetor on there and it still stalled, now we had two carburetors that reacted differently on how the saw ran, but it still stalled. So I was pretty convinced it was ignition. And then I opened up the muffler. I put, you know, a gutted muffler on there. Man, what a difference that made. Of all the things, the two biggest performance gains to the saw were the carburetor change and the gutted muffler. That made a huge difference. You can see on the videos, probably 20%. That's a lot. Still stalled. Got a care package from the Cutting Edge out in Greenwich, New York. Thank you very much, Steve. And he wanted me to try some things. And he sent me a different carburetor and the low top original style filter system and a red ignition system. You know, I knew it was ignition. You know, I honestly didn't care if it was the red or the black at this point. I just wanted to run. And some bucking spikes and stuff like that. So he gave me a few things. And I tried putting on the original carburetor that he sent me. That was for like a, I think a 7300 is what he said. It's not an easy blend. Just a lot of little details made that where I just quit doing it because, you know, I kept hacking and cutting. I took off the limiting plastic, and then I realized that the adjuster screw diameter won't fit through the little rubber guide there. So I was like, okay, went back to my 372 carb. Also noticed that the inside diameter of the 372 carb was larger, so the performance side of me said, you know, I don't want to change that. And put the red ignition on. And I've got a half hour, another tank going right now. So I went through one whole tank. I'm into another tank. It did not stall, has not shown any of the characteristics that the other ignition was showing about it beginning to lose power, then stall. None of that. It runs beautifully. And this saw runs beautifully right now. And you may see that in the video. Oh yeah, the other change I made was cutting back the bucking spike. Now, I like this configuration. The way it is right now, I like it. I like this right now. The only thing I'm going to change is I'm going to put a longer bar, probably a 28, minimum 24, but probably a 28. I have to say this steel RS chain, that stuff wears well. It has not stretched one bit. Conversely, while I was running the Husky alongside this, you know, the hose former chain I had on that Husky was stretching like crazy. And I had to sharpen it a couple of times. The steel both holds the edge better and doesn't stretch as compared. He also sent me some Oregon chain. We'll look at that at a different point in time. But back to the saw, the way this is configured, I like the way these bucking spikes hold the work away from the saw. I cut that one back so it doesn't jam and stall the chain. I like the lower filter. I'm not sure it made a whole lot of a difference in the way it ran, but I just like it. It's just like with the 372 XP with the tall filter in cover. I don't like that as much as I do the low top 365. Well, this falls into the same category. I like this better than I like the high top there. But so I'd say the three significant differences between this saw and stock were all important, every one of them. Carburetor change was big. The muffler, getting rid of that goofy, whatever this thing is, muffler, that was very, very big. That was an instant 15 to 20% change right there, just that alone. Of course, that was in concert with the bigger carburetor, which I didn't realize at the time, didn't think about it at the time. It wasn't until I saw the other carburetor that I realized that the 372 has a larger inside diameter. So, and then of course the red ignition. Those three things are critical. And my bucking spike, that's, you know, kind of icing on the cake. But after those 4 modifications, this is, in my mind, a work-ready saw. Like I said, a longer bar. But the power is nice. Nice power. Nice throttle response. Crisp, clean, instant, no bog anywhere, you know. So you like old school carbureted, no auto-tune? I got to tell you, this is a saw that got my attention. I can tell you that. Is it going to knock my Huskies off the, you know, knock them out of the pocket? I don't know about that. They're about the same weight. This one's got definitely more power than my 572 stockers. It's roughly the same as my modified 572 HTSS. It's in that same ballpark. So those two saws, think about it, those two saws are in the same power, and right now I'm thinking the same fuel usage category. In the ergonomics of this, with the slant on the handle, is similar to a Husky. So if you like Husky, you'll like this. Darn, I think it's a pretty powerful 1-2 punch. I'll set up my felon saw the way I always do, the 572 with the regular handle and the 28. And I think this saw is going to be the other saw with the full wrap, same length bar for doing just about everything else. And then I'll have a spare. But wow, what a difference! And it was worth the effort. Yeah, you got to do a lot of stuff. I don't know that all of them are going to have a bad ignition. I can't tell you that, but I can tell you that carburetor change and muffler change, and cutting back the spike, those three things are, in my mind, a must. I wouldn't even consider this package without doing those things. The filter is nice. I like it, so it's a detailed touch that I happen to like. We'll see. I haven't given up on the other one. I may go back and forth once just to see. I think what I'll do is I'm going to wait to see over time if I get dust and stuff. That was the original complaint on the original filter setup. But if I don't see that, I'm just going to leave it like that because I like the lower top. So what do you think? Running out of fingers here. Carburetor was huge. Muffler mod was huge. Ignition was huge. Cutting back the spikes was very big in terms of just using the saw and the filter. All 5 changes. I would do it again, and I would recommend somebody considering at least 4 of the 5 changes. You know, if they have one of these saws. But yeah. Now, the one thing that makes me a little bit nervous, but I've been told it's not an issue, is hear it? You got a hoot owl. But the one thing that makes me nervous is the size of the fasteners, like in the muffler. They're all a little bit smaller in diameter. I kind of checked them after I ran it, and I didn't see anything loosen up. I know they're going to stretch a little more, so they're like a spring, and that's going to help the vibration resistance to backing out. But if they don't pull out the threads over time, you know, and I haven't heard anybody say they do, you know, maybe it's just me liking the bigger hardware I get on the Huskies, but you know, if they don't fail, it's just a concern. It's not an issue. So anyway, it's getting dark. I better get out of here. To say that I'm pleased is an understatement. I am absolutely pleased with the way this came out. I really like this saw. Oh, you got company. The wildlife is saying, "What are you doing? Talking to yourself out in the middle of the woods." All right, let me see if I can put together a video.